Hey YouTube, Kat here. I've just got Lachlan with me again. He's going to show you guys how to make a witch's besom. So the witch's besom, or the broom, is basically for clearing negative energy out of your circle area before you do your circle work. So we're going to show you how to make one. Basically what you're going to need is a decent length stick. Try and get one off the ground if possible rather than cutting it from a tree. And what you want to do, as you can see here, is scrape all the bark off of it. If you want to leave some of it for a pattern like this one, that's perfectly fine. But you need to remove the bark so that you can varnish it to stop it getting damaged. As for the length of the stick, it's pretty much up to you, but generally speaking, a witch's besom, once it's completed, will stand just above your shoulder. So that's the first thing you need. Now, you're going to need a nice big ball of twine. You can get this from pretty much anywhere. I got mine from Shiploads. I think it was like 80 cents, so that was pretty cool. Going to need a hot glue gun, which you can get from most hardware stores, even places like the Reject Shop, and obviously the glue sticks you'll need for it as well. And then you're going to need something to actually use for the broom itself. Now, I've actually used willow. I went and collected a whole heap of willow branches. Took quite a lot. Now you're going to need a decent amount because you want your broom to be nice and thick. So that's how much I've got for mine there. And then basically we're going to bind it all up and show you how to make the actual broom section of it. Lachlan's going to help me bind this one up. You will need an extra hand because it does get quite tricky. You've got to bind it really tight, otherwise what's going to happen is all the pieces are going to fall out of the middle. So what you do, rather than getting all of the willow at the same time and wrapping it around and tying it up, you're going to get pieces falling out if you do that. So if you do them in smaller bundles and bind each bundle like that, you're going to need about 8 bundles if they're that size, depending on the thickness of the handle that you're using. And what we'll do is we bind all these singly and then we bind them around the handle once we're finished. So to bind them's fairly easy. You want them all to be the same length. Now the length is up to you depending on how long you want the broom to be. And then what you want to do is line them up at the top because it's hard to cut it off once it's been bound already. So basically you hold it nice and tight, so I'll get Lachlan to hold that one for me. And then what you want to do is you want to make your basic slip knot, which I'm guessing most of you guys know how to do. If not, you can look it up, but the knot will just slip around, which will tighten it. So you put that around the end, if you can see that. Now the other thing you want to do is when you're binding each bundle, you want to make sure that where the string is even. So if you look here, we line it all up, just to make it easier to bind at the end. There's no messy areas then. Now you want to bind it as tight as possible. How far round you go is up to you, but you do want to leave a little bit of the willow at the top because that's what gives it that witch's broom look. So it needs to be nice and tight. Now what we've been doing is we tie it off around one of the pieces of willow, but we also just hot glue it just to make sure it doesn't fall apart because it does take a long time and you don't want it all falling to pieces on you within the first week. Now my suggestion, if you are using willow, will be to try and get it while it's still slightly green. Even if it's got leaves on it, that's perfectly fine, because that way when you're binding it, it's not going to snap because it's dry. So what's going to happen with this one is I'll bind it nice and tightly and it's not going to snap just because it is still quite pliable, and then it will dry on its own and will go that dark colour rather than this odd green colour, and it'll just dry over time. Yes, olive. So I've just tied it around one of the sticks to finish it off, and then what you do is you grab your hot glue gun just to finish it off, run the glue around the edge like so, just to make sure that there's no messy ends, and then you finish it off. So now we've got all our bundles that we need. So here's my ones I prepared earlier, with Lachlan's help, of course. Now, if you guys don't have access to willow, which a lot of people don't, there's other things you can use. Birch tree branches are really, really good. Or the other thing you can do if you don't have access to anything like that is just straw. If you can't find straw out in the wild, you can always buy like an old straw broom and just take it apart and use the straw from that and do the exact same thing, so bundle it up. But I just like the look of willow because it's a lot more natural. And it's a lot easier to work with just because of the way it sits.
It would also last longer than the straw, wouldn't it?
That's it, yep, it will last a lot longer than the straw. What I'm going to do is I'm now going to try and bind it to this stick, so this is where it's going to get fun. But the way I've found is easiest is you get yourself a decent length of string. Now you're going to need a lot of string, and I mean a lot, because you want the binding to be about yay thick at the top, just to hold it all in. And then what you can do is you can do another slip knot technique. So I'll just show you guys how to do the slip knot. So if you just fold it over at the end, tie a standard knot inside the loop, which will give you a nice little loop at the end, like so. Then you just grab the rest of the string, pull it through, and you've got a slip knot, which will actually tighten the harder you pull, whereas a normal knot will start to loosen and also twist around. So at least this way it's going to stay nice and tight. Now, what we're going to do is we choose one of the bundles, so if you want to hold that for me, Lachlan, and you want to put it a little bit below where you've put the original binding, because of course you want it to be that nice thickness. Alright, and once you've tightened it up, wrap it around just a couple of times so it's nice and tight. And then you're going to sit it on your tree, on your branch here. Now you're going to want to have quite a lot of overlap so that it stays nice and tight. It doesn't have to be too much, but at least yay much, so it'll still stick out the bottom, and that's all fine. Now what you want to do is you want to attach the first one, which is always the hardest. But if we attach that one first, hope you guys can see this, it's a little bit difficult. And then what you can do is pull it all through. Alright, now it needs to, like I said, it needs to be quite tight. And then you'll go around that way.
Oh, you will.
And what you want to do a few layers to hold the first one on. And then once you've got the first one tight, as I said, it's a lot easier with somebody else. Thank you, Lachlan.
Sorry.
Make sure it's nice and tight. Then, once that one's there, you can then go and put your next one on. Now the way I do it, okay, so I lay the string back down on top of the stick. I put the next bundle over the top of the string, like so. I then grab the string and bring it up through, and that will actually attach this one to the previous one. So you go round,
just under
and over the top there, so that it's all nicely attached. Now obviously we'll fix this binding, it'll be a lot neater once we've had a chance to go around it a few hundred or so times. So again, nice and tight. So that should be starting to firm up a bit. Now the more bundles that you put on, obviously the firmer it's going to get. Make sure that up the top here they're all nice and lined up, because you don't want it jagged and sitting everywhere. So again, I'll have the string go under the next one. So you just keep going around as such. I'll bring it down so it goes over and then under this willow here, and then you can tighten that. Again, make sure it's all lined up. It's a lot harder to try and line it up once it's tight, so try and do it. And if Lachlan just wants to wrap a couple of layers nice and tight, thanks Lachlan, put those muscles to use, or lack thereof. Okay, so that's probably enough there. Then again, you go under. So I'm going to finish up this little bit here. I'm going to go right round, and then I'll come back to you guys and show you where we're up to.